All right, so as I mentioned, this is chapter 4 on demand. So this is the very beginning of demand notes. Keep in mind that this schedule demand curve is part of your notes, but obviously it wasn't like formally written down the same way that we normally write regular stuff. So to start off with, we have to actually define what demand is. I asked you in your warm-up what you thought demand is, but we need a formal definition here. So notice that demand is in green and bold. I tried to make sure that anytime we talk about terms, it's a different color than the rest of the stuff, so you recognize that it's a special term you need to know. Yes, at the end of this chapter, you will have a quiz over demand. So it will be the same format of the chapter 1 and chapter 2 quiz, where it's 10 matching, 10 multiple choice, and an essay. All right, so back to demand. Demand is the desire and ability to buy a product. I already told you this. Remember, we have to have the desire for a product. In other words, we will have to want it, but we also have to have the ability to buy it. Okay? Just because I want a BMW, I don't count in the demand for a BMW because I can't buy one. So that's the idea of what demand is. Now, we can also talk about something called the law of demand. And believe it or not, this is something that you actually knew before you came in this class. You just didn't know the name for it. So the law of demand is basically saying that the quantity demanded of a product varies inversely to the price of that product. Okay, that sounds very technical. What does inverse mean? Opposite. So the price varies oppositely to the quantity. So what that means is that when we see the price of a product going up, okay, the price of the product is going up. They're increasing the price of something. What happens to the demand? It's going to go down. Yeah, you have all these lovely people that are saying, no, thank you. So, with the law of demand, okay, so price goes up, quantity demand goes down. This is something that you guys already knew. Anytime they talk about price hikes, and specifically in like cell phone contracts or TV, like cable TV or satellite TV, and they talk about the price going up, people always complain, and there's a bunch of people that say, I'm not going to buy it, I'm not going to use it, this is ridiculous, I'm not going to use it anymore. And so the quantity demand goes down. Now the inverse, the opposite is also true, where as the price goes down, the quantity demand goes up. You see this all the time when, for example, there's a sale at the mall, okay, and there's a sale at the mall or a sale in any particular store. What happens to the amount of people that are in the store? It increases. You have tons and tons of people in there. So the idea of the law of demand is that price and quantity are inversely related. They go in the opposite direction. Okay, so moving on, I have this as my lovely example here of demand. Does anybody read Calvin and Hobbes? I know that it's kind of discontinued. My mom does. Calvin and Hobbes, yeah? You have read it in the past? For those of you that don't know and have not seen Calvin and Hobbes before, Calvin is a spiky-haired kid, okay? Hobbes is actually not in this specific cartoon that I'm showing you. Hobbes is the stuffed tiger. It's Calvin's stuffed tiger, and sometimes Hobbes talks to him. Obviously, it is his imagination, but Hobbes talks to him. And then in this particular cartoon, you have this little girl here. Yes, that is a little girl in the brown hair. What's her name? Do you know? Her name's Susie. Okay, that's Susie. And Susie is kind of Calvin's arch nemesis. Okay, so just to kind of set you up here. So I'll read you the cartoon. It says, Calvin is selling lemonade. Okay, he's selling lemonade for $15 a glass. Okay, and Susie comes up and says, 15 bucks a glass. Calvin says, that's right, want some? Susie says, how do you justify charging $15? Calvin says, supply and demand. Susie says, where's the demand? I don't see any demand. Calvin says, there's lots of demand. Susie says, yeah? He says, sure. As a sole stockholder in this enterprise, I demand monstrous profits reports on my investment. And as president and CEO of the company, I demand an exorbitant annual salary. And as my own employee, I demand a high hourly wage and all sorts of company benefits, and then there's overhead and actual production costs. Susie says, but it looks like you just threw a lemon in some sludge water. Calvin says, well, I have to cut expenses somewhere if I want to stay competitive. Susie says, what if I get sick from that? Calvin says, Cabin and board is the motto we stand behind. I'd have to charge more if we followed health and environmental regulations. Susie says, you're out of your mind. I'm going home to drink something else. Calvin says, sure, put me out of a job. It's you anti-business types who ruin the economy. And then Calvin's sitting there all disgusted and angry, and he goes over to his mom, and he tells his mom, I need to be subsidized. You get it? It's funny if you understand some basic economic terms. First of all, is Calvin using demand properly? No! Demand is referring to whom in an economic exchange? The buyers, the consumers. He's referring to who? The business owner, the sellers, okay? That's not demand, that's supply, okay? There will be times when we talk about stuff in here for demand, and I will tell you that's not demand, it's supply. Please don't be offended, okay? Now, the other thing is that the Cabin and board, I know I probably said that really, really badly because I do not speak Latin, but anybody know what that particular phrase in Latin means? The Cabin and board, this one. It's a phrase that means let the buyer beware. Is that a good business model to have? Yeah, it's basically having a big old caution label on your product, right? So it's not exactly a great business model to have. And then at the very end, we talked about, it says, I need to be subsidized. We talked about subsidies in chapter 3. Do you remember what subsidies mean? Kind of. What was the, they pay for, remember, what was our example of the subsidy? What? Yep, the flu shot. We said that the government will pay to encourage people to get the flu shot. The idea behind the subsidy is that the government will pay to encourage an economic activity. Okay? So they will pay to encourage people to do a specific thing. And in this case, obviously, Calvin is thinking that the government is who? Who's the government in this scenario? Mom. Mom is the government. So his thought is that his mom needs to give him money to encourage him to continue to be able to sell lemonade. Okay? Understand some basic economic principles. It's actually really funny cartoon. Okay? All right. I got one last slide for you.